Hello, everyone. My name is Kat Oriel with Forbes Breaking News, and today I'm here with radio show host and former 2024 presidential candidate Larry Elder. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Kat, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. So news broke today that Governor Gavin Newsom is facing yet another recall threat in California. And in 2021, you, in fact, were the top Republican candidate in the first recall election against him. And now, 3 years later, what is your reaction to this new push to recall him? Why is it necessary to report him? And does this particular effort have any teeth to it? Because I feel like there's always petitions being launched against him to oust him.
Well, Kat, I kind of told all in my book that just now came out called As Goes California, My Mission to Rescue the Golden State and Save the Nation. And it's all about why I decided to run, what the issues were, the number of people that are leaving California, the high cost of living, or the average price of a home in California is twice that of the national average. Our schools are near the bottom. We have a high percentage of the nation's homelessness. I think about 30% of the nation's homeless population lives here in California. We have a very high poverty rate. And the crime from 2019 in many areas, like in the Bay Area, LA, San Diego, is substantially up. We have a governor who's been supporting these soft on crime DAs, like the one that got recalled in San Francisco, the one here in LA, who's faced 2 recall challenges. He supports, Gavin Newsom does, cashless bail, which in my opinion is what's causing some of the crime to go up. So all the problems that took place in 2021, Kat, in my opinion, have only gotten worse. Also, the budget's gotten worse. At one time, there was a budget surplus of about $100 billion that Gavin Newsom bragged about. Now that's a budget deficit of $73 billion. So our finances are awful. People are leaving. The people who are leaving are wealthier than the people who are coming here. There's been a net loss of about 1 million people in California in the last 3 years. Things are not getting any better. So I understand why people want a recall effort. As to your second question, whether it's doable, it's tough. California, Republicans are outnumbered almost 3-1 here in California. A large number of people since the first recall in 2003 are now registered as Democrats compared to 2003. There's about a 25% decline in registered Republicans and about a 50% increase in decline in state or non-party preferences or what are called independents in other states. And independents in California typically vote Democrat. A Republican has not won statewide in California in almost 20 years. So it's going to be hard. But it doesn't mean that it's not worth the effort because Gavin Newsom is thinking about running for president. I don't believe that Gavin Newsom is going to replace Kamala Harris in the event that Joe Biden can't fog up a mirror come November. But a lot of people do. And if that's serious, just reminding people of how bad things are in California, how he shut down the state in a more severe way than anybody else did. About a third of all restaurants in California, most of these are owned and run by people of color, the kinds of people that people on the left claim that they care about, are now gone forever. And if you think about it, something like almost 70% of the nation believes we're on the wrong track. Why? The economy. Why is the economy so bad? Because of all the money that Joe Biden spent to help to cause inflation. Gavin Newsom applauded it. Gas prices are high. Why? Because of this war on oil and gas and this, in my opinion, hysteria about climate change. Gavin Newsom wants to bar the sale of new gas-powered cars by 2035. It's my long way of saying he's more of a climate change extremist than Joe Biden is. Gavin Newsom has said nothing at all about the porous borders. In fact, California is a sanctuary state. So if you're unhappy about how the country is going, what in the world makes you think Gavin Newsom has a prescription to make things better? And regarding pulling out of Afghanistan, which in my opinion has caused Putin to be more aggressive, China to be more aggressive, and Iran to be more aggressive, Gavin Newsom was one of the few politicians who applauded what Joe Biden did when he pulled out the troops in Afghanistan. So there's nothing, in my opinion, about Gavin Newsom's resume that would suggest to me, if I'm somebody who's unhappy about the direction of the country, that he's the guy. So the recall effort, if it just points out some of these kinds of things, if it doesn't succeed, to me, will still be a worthy effort.
Well, as I mentioned, you were the top Republican candidate to replace him during the first recall effort 3 years ago. So I have to ask, would you run to replace Newsom if the recall petition is successfully pushed to the ballot box?
Now, Kat, why did I anticipate you were going to ask me that question? Let me just remind you, I finished #1, as you pointed out, among all the replacement candidates. There were 40 46 counting myself. I got 49% of the vote on the replacement side. The next highest person got 9%. I got in with just 8 weeks left in the campaign. In 8 weeks, I raised $27 million, more than all the other replacement candidates combined. California has 58 counties, as you know, you're from here. I carried 57 and 58. The only one I lost was San Francisco, and I lost that by, wait for it, 149 votes. And still, Gavin Newsom, assuming you believe that the election was conducted fairly, and I've never said otherwise, won by about 20 points. And the animating issue then was because of the way Gavin Newsom was at the French Laundry restaurant, having passed onerous mandates for everybody else, masking and social distancing. He wasn't wearing a mask. He wasn't engaging in social distancing. He was with the very people that helped to draft the mandates that he wasn't following, and it really angered people. Well, the pandemic is now receded. That's not an issue anymore. So while I mentioned many of the other things have gotten worse, the crime and the homelessness and people leaving, that issue is no longer on the table. So in my humble opinion, it's going to be very, very difficult to recall this guy. But it's worth doing. I mean, he's going to be in office until January of 2027. You can do a lot of damage between now and then. And believe me, he will.
But my initial question, are you going to run again?
Oh, I guess I didn't answer. I guess I didn't answer the question. Let me answer it this way, Kat. I've been asked this several times by media since the recall has been announced. You're too young to remember this, but there was a fighter named Larry Holmes. He was a heavyweight champion, and he fought a guy named Randall Tex Cobb. In those days, the championship fights were 15 rounds. And Larry Holmes hit Randall Tex Cobb with everything but the kitchen sink, and the man would not go down. So he finished the fight standing up on his feet, and a reporter rushes into the ring and asks this guy, Randall Cobb, as he's bleeding and exhausted, would you fight Larry Holmes in a rematch? And he said no. Larry Holmes couldn't take the punishment. Mm-hmm. So that's my answer. I think I've given enough. I've run for governor. I've run for president. I ran for third grade class president. I did win that race, so I'm 1 out of 3. If I were a baseball player, I'd be batting .333 and I'd be in the Hall of Fame. But this is not baseball. So I think I've given to the office. So the likelihood of my running again is not very great. How's that?
Good answer. I'm thinking that's a good record. I don't know. I'm not a big Dodgers. I'm a fan of the Dodgers, but I don't follow baseball that well. So those numbers went all over my head, but I'm going to say that's a good average. So,
okay, yeah.
So if you're not planning on running again, how do you plan to be involved with the efforts to recall him? And if so, like, what do you think was learned in 2021? I mean, you're saying the efforts are still valiant, even if it's not successful, but what makes you confident in the same group? Because Rescue California is the same group that's filing this petition now that filed it in 2021. So are you confident that the leadership there has learned from their mistakes in the past?
Well, as I said, it's going to be an uphill fight no matter what. I mean, the battlefield is just really, really daunting. When you consider, as I said earlier, there hasn't been a Republican elected statewide in almost 20 years. And all they did during the recall, I did not get an endorsement from Donald Trump. His people reached out, but I wanted to make this California-centric. So I did not invite endorsements from any of the outside politicians, even though several approached me and wanted to endorse me. Because I knew what they were going to do, which was to turn this into a referendum on Donald Trump and a referendum on Republicans in particular. And that's exactly what they did, Kat. Every TV ad showed a picture of Donald Trump and me. I had taken one picture of myself with the former president, the only one I had, and they showed it over and over and over again. And Gavin Newsom said, stop the Republican takeover. Kamala Harris cut a commercial for him. Joe Biden came out and campaigned for him. Bernie Sanders cut a commercial. Elizabeth Warren did. And they all said the same thing. Stop the Republican takeover. Nobody said Gavin Newsom is doing a great job on crime, doing a great job on water preservation, doing a great job on forest fire mitigation, doing a great job on schools, on budget, on people leaving, on the way it shut down the state. They didn't say any of that. They just said, stop the Republican takeover, because voters in California have been indoctrinated to believe no matter how bad things are, dastardly Republicans would make things worse. So that sentiment is still there. How you fight that, I don't know. If I had the formula for that, we'd be conducting this interview from the mansion in Sacramento.
And just looking towards Newsom's future, I mean, you've mentioned it as well. He's acting as a spokesperson for the Biden campaign, some might say. So Rescue California, when I was reading the reason why they decided to file this petition again, they claim that he's too busy focusing on the national spotlight instead of addressing issues facing California. So looking to the rest of 2024, there's still some speculation that he could enter the presidential race. What's your reaction to that possibility?
Oh, okay, he'd love to. He wants to be president. I think he's been running for president since he's been in the 5th grade. Here's the problem. He knows that if he tries to displace the likely successor, if Joe Biden can't make it, her name is Kamala Harris, he will be raked over the coals by the most loyal part of the Democratic base, which are Black voters. And Black female voters are even more loyal. I mean, Donald Trump got 20% of the Black male vote in 2020. He did not get nearly that high of the Black female vote. And Blacks love Kamala Harris. While her numbers are worse than Joe Biden's nationwide, one poll in the LA Times had her popularity among Blacks at 70%. It wasn't broken down by gender, but I assure you, among Black females, her rating is even higher. And if she is perceived to have been dropkicked for some white man like Gavin Newsom, Black voters will be livid. They won't vote Republican, don't get me wrong, they just won't vote at all, thereby guaranteeing whoever our nominee is, and I assume it's going to be Donald Trump, will win. They cannot afford to do that, and Gavin Newsom knows that. I mean, think about it. When Bernie Sanders won the Nevada caucuses in 2020, for a while he was the party's frontrunner, a self-described Democrat socialist, and they were scared to death. On the eve of the South Carolina primary, Representative Clyburn then endorsed Joe Biden, whose campaign was going nowhere, and Joe Biden wins the South Carolina primary, and everybody coalesces around him. And Clyburn extracted a promise from Joe Biden that your first Supreme Court nominee would be what? A Black female. His running mate was a Black female. And when it was obvious that Dianne Feinstein was not going to be able to finish out her term, Gavin Newsom publicly said, I'm going to appoint a Black female, and did so. So now you have a Black female on deck, to use another baseball analogy, Kat, and you're going to drop kick her for a white man like Gavin Newsom? Not going to fly. And Gavin Newsom knows that. Otherwise, why would he run right now? Why hasn't he announced? Joe Biden's numbers are bad. It's clear that his mental fitness is declining. It's all teed up for him. Why hasn't he run? He hasn't run because Kamala Harris wants the job. She ran for president, and consider this, she ran for DA in San Francisco. She won. She ran for AG in California. She won. She ran re-election for AG. She won. She ran for US Senate in California. She won. She's on the ticket with Joe Biden, and she won. She's never lost an election when she's been on the ticket. So she doesn't believe she's incompetent. She doesn't believe that she's vacuous. And for Black females, I read a lot of the Black media, they believe that the ridicule of Kamala Harris's so-called cackle is both sexist and racist. And they believe that Joe Biden has given her thankless tasks like getting to the bottom of the root cause of illegal immigration, when the root cause of illegal immigration is Joe Biden. So they feel she's been mistreated, handled badly by the Biden administration. And again, if she's tossed aside, there will be hell to pay. And Gavin Newsom knows that, which is why he hasn't declared.
Mm. Going back to, this is a little bit of an aside, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on the Senate race and what you think about his choice to appoint LaFonza Butler, because you're so keyed into the Black community and the California community. So I'm just curious your thoughts on her, how she's doing as your senator so far, and your thoughts on the race in general.
Well, he appointed somebody who said that she would not run for a full term. And so mission accomplished. The reason he did that, he did not want to get between Adam Schiff and Barbara Lee and Katie Porter. And so he's achieved his objective. She hasn't made much of a splash one way or the other. The way this race is going, as you know, California has a jungle primary. So the top two finishers in the primary go off against each other in the general. And the way it works is that the top finisher, the likely top finisher it was Gavin Newsom the last time here for governor. For Senate right now, the top finisher is Adam Schiff. And the last thing he wants to do is square off against another Democrat. So if you look at the ads that Adam Schiff puts on all talk about Steve Garvey, and not in a nasty way, or in a way that we would perceive as nasty. He says Steve Garvey voted for Donald Trump twice. Well, if you're a Republican in California, that's exactly what you want. So what Adam Schiff wants is for all the Republicans to vote for Steve Garvey, so that Garvey finishes number 2, and he'll slaughter him. He's raised $30 million, Adam Schiff has, versus $600,000 that Steve Garvey's raised. Meanwhile, Katie Porter has raised quite a bit of money. She's almost at about 19%. Schiff's at 24%. Garvey's around 18%. And so he wants Garvey to be the top person, which is why he's running those kinds of ads. Now, Katie Porter is running ads, including Garvey, and also talking about Eric Early, who's also a Republican, even though he only has about 2% of the vote. Why? She wants Garvey and Eric Early to split the Republican vote so she can finish number 2 behind Adam Schiff. I hope you're following all of this. The idea is that Schiff wants to face Garvey, does not want to face Porter. Porter wants to face Schiff, does not want Garvey to finish number 2, otherwise she's out.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your insight into that race. Now going back to Newsom, a few more questions for you. I'm just curious if in these recall efforts, you think, giving it could potentially give Newsom ammo, and for him, it could actually backfire, and for him to be able to raise money on this and campaign on this, and therefore continue his popularity for a continued political future down the line, and for him to say, the recall in 2021 was shot down by a large majority, and then he won by a good majority back in 2022. So what if this recall, is successful and then he is able to shoot it down again? Could that backfire for the Republicans?
Well, that's exactly how he will respond to it when he survived this recall. And for a while, remember, it was in the margin of error. He was scared to death. I got outspent 10-1. In fact, he had to spend twice as much per voter to retain his job as he did to keep his job. So they were scared to death for a while. And then when it was all over, he perceived himself to have had a mandate and then signed a bunch of job-killing bills that he wouldn't have signed otherwise. So if he survives, if there is a recall, the 1.6 signatures are in fact gathered in time, and he is recalled, face a recall election again, and he survives, he will consider it to be another victory, another mandate, and he will use it, as you pointed out, to fundraise. On the other hand, it will point out to people in the other 49 states about the crime, about the homelessness, about how he's taken a surplus and made it into a deficit, about the number of people who are leaving California, and about the job-killing bills he signed. Recently, he just signed a bill to raise the minimum wage for some workers to $50 an hour, effective in April. As soon as that bill was signed, Pizza Hut laid off 1,200 truck drivers en masse. That's the downside to some of these job-killing bills that people like Gavin Newsom, who's to the left of Joe Biden, is doing to our state. So if the recall does nothing else but shed light on all of this, then to me, it might very well have been worth the effort. But you're quite right. If he survives it, he'll suggest he's gotten another mandate, and these dastardly Republicans do anything they can to take down somebody who otherwise is doing a great job for the state of California. That's how he'll position it, of course.
I always like to also, in my interviews, come to at least some point of consensus or ask about it. So I know you've mentioned so many issues that you find with Gov Newsom, but is there anywhere at all where you think he's improved in the past 4 or 5 years that he's been in office, and anything that you're happy with him about or can at least somewhat agree with him on?
He did apologize for the French Laundry thing and recognized how hypocritical it was. So I will give him that. Outside of that, on crime, bad. On homelessness, bad. On schools, bad. On budget, bad. On job-killing bills, bad. On fire management, bad. On water retention, bad. I honestly can't think of anything that this man has done that has made the state better. And think about this too, Kat. This guy has been in positions of power for at least 20 years. He was a 2-term mayor of San Francisco while the homeless problem and the crime problem got worse. He was a 2-term lieutenant governor. And he's been now into his 2nd term as governor. That's been in 20 years position of responsibility. And in those 20 years, I would argue that California has gotten worse. And the middle class and the working class are the people that have suffered the most. So I can't think of much of anything that Gavin Newsom has done that I can applaud.
Mm-hmm. And my final
question. He's got great hair. He's got great hair.
I'll give him that. Yeah. My last question.
I'll give him that.
Give him that. My last question for you is, your final message to people that say, we don't know if this recall effort, if they're gonna, like you said, get the 1.6 million signatures. But what is your message to people who say this is just going to create further division and unnecessary distractions from governing? If you want him out, okay, he's going to be term limited in 4 years. So what do you say to those people who are just questioning the recall effort right now and say it's politically motivated?
I would ask them to read my book, As Goes California, and read all the reasons why Gavin Newsom needs to go. And not just Gavin Newsom. There's been a stranglehold in Sacramento. There is a supermajority of Democrats in the House, in the Assembly, supermajority of Democrats in the Senate, and they can pass one job-killing bill after another without Republicans having any kind of input at all. So I'm urging people to rethink some of their assumptions. And again, if the recall points attention to crime, points attention to homelessness, points attention to why people are leaving, why the cost of living is so high because of this marriage between these Democrats and these environmental extremists that don't want any kind of construction. We have probably at least 1 million or 2 fewer housing units in this state than we otherwise would if it weren't for this environmental fanaticism that we have. So I'm asking people to rethink some of their assumptions. And if the recall just shed some attention on some of these issues, maybe, just maybe, then it will be worth the effort.
Thank you so much for your time this evening, Larry.
Kat, it is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.